Hi, I'm George and today I'm here with Wex Photo Video in Richmond Park and we're testing out the brand new lens from Canon, the f2.8 24-105 RF lens. It's the L USM Z Lens, and that's part of the new Z series from Canon, which is a true hybrid series between photo and video, but we'll get more on that later. But the thing that I'm really excited about is that it's the world's first ever f2.8 24-105. Let's go test it out. So the most notable thing about this lens, which I just mentioned, is the fact that it is the world's first 24-105 f2.8. Previously, we used to seeing 24-105 lenses be f4. Now, that additional few stops is just going to become so useful in so many environments. Firstly, of course, you get that nice appealing depth of field, but also you're going to get those few extra stops of light. This is really good because it just means that you're going to be able to use the lens in lower light environments without introducing any issues with noise. Perfect for people like event shooters, which I think this lens is really well targeted for, because if you're somebody that just wants one lens to pop on your camera, but to cover a huge range of stuff, this is just going to be perfect. Having that 24mm all the way through to 105mm, you're not really going to need anything more than that. I actually typically shoot on a 24-70, so being able to get that extra 35mm just allows me to get so many more shots. For example, if I was actually using a 24-70 right now, there's a load of deer behind me, they're really cool, but on 70mm, there's kind of a limit of how close I'm going to be able to get. I'm not going to be able to get perhaps all the shots I want to because I can't get too close to the deer without disturbing them. Having that extra 35mm is really nice, but then also being able to shoot at 2.8 to still get that nice depth, it's perfect. And I just think that's so cool that they've been able to actually combine both of those amazing features of those two lenses into one system. So one of the really nice things about this lens is the fact that I've been using it handheld. And you would think there is one really notable thing about this lens, is it's massive. It's a really big lens. Now, luckily it has that internal zoom. Now, I think that's one of those things where Canon have been speaking about with that part stills, part video feature. The fact that it has an internal zoom is really nice. It means that if you were to, say, put this on a gimbal or even just on a tripod, you're not gonna like completely throw off your weight balance, which is really nice. But it is quite a big lens. So I've been wondering, how's it gonna be when I'm using it handheld? And I've been really, really impressed. I've been shooting these deer all the way at 105mm, and you'd think shooting 105mm, shooting video, you aren't probably gonna get the cleanest shots. There might be problems with shake, but the lens itself actually has 5.5 stops of image stabilization in it, which is really good. Then when it's combined with a compatible body like the R5 that I'm using today, it goes all the way up to 8 stops of image stabilization, which is so much. That means that actually you're gonna get really, really clean footage, as I've been finding. Now at 105, that means that I can shoot handheld and get really nice close-ups, but actually it means if I go all the way through to 24, I can actually get walking shots too, and they're gonna have sort of a gimbal-esque motion, but without me using that gimbal. So yes, it's a big lens, yes, it's a heavy lens, but actually the weight distribution is really good, and the internal stabilization in it is really good, and those two things are partnering really well to give me nice, stable footage. So this is Canon's first ever Z lens. Now, what does that mean? Well, they're basically a true hybrid lens between stills and video. Canon noticed that actually they had some really good video focus lenses. They have a really nice cine range that have sort of all controls that video shooters really like having a lot of on-body controls, like aperture rings, stuff like that. And they have dedicated stills lenses. These stills lenses have things like autofocus and IBIS, which are really useful for photographers. So they noticed a little gap in the market, and they actually have lots of hybrid cameras. The R5 that I have in my hand is a perfect example of a hybrid stills and video camera. So it makes sense that they would also have a dedicated hybrid lens. Now, what actually makes it that Z lens is the fact that it has all of these functions. So firstly, it's got an iris ring. That's really nice if you want to control your aperture without actually needing to use the camera body. It actually declicks, so it's really smooth, which is really nice if you want to change your aperture easily on the fly. It also has lots of functions, like the fact that obviously you have your standard zoom ring. It's a zoom lens, it's going to have a zoom ring. It has a focus ring, of course, but then it also has stuff like it has image stabilization. It actually has 3 modes of image stabilization, which is really cool. It has autofocus, so the standard autofocus that you're going to see in stills lenses from Canon, which is really nice because we know that Canon's autofocus system in their cameras and their lenses is incredible, especially on that RF range. It also has functions like a power mount. It's electronically parfocal, so that actually means that it's not a true parfocal lens, but essentially the USM motor in that is actually compensating. So when I zoom in, it's basically going to compensate for that and making sure that whatever is in focus is remaining sharp whilst I'm zooming in or out, which is really cool. That's especially good for video users because let's say I'm recording like a conference or something. This is a really good lens to record a conference on because you could get that nice wide 24. But then if I zoom in all the way to 105 to say zoom in on the speaker and focus on them, it's not going to lose focus, it's going to retain on them, which is super useful. It means that I don't have to faff around with then adjusting the manual focus. Along with that parfocalness, you actually have minimal focus breathing, which is really nice. And it has servo control, so if you want to hook it up with a servo, that's really nice if you want to remote control your focus. It also actually has a huge range of remote control functionalities, and there's actually an adapter that I'm going to tell you about in a moment, which you can also control completely remotely. The autofocus system is incredibly quiet, which again is really useful for video users, and the same with this non-clickable iris ring. It's completely silent, so that means that if you're doing a long form take and you're adjusting your settings on the fly, it's not going to make noise. If you're using autofocus for video, it's not going to make noise. There's just so many amazing features that they've packed into this lens, which really do go in line with what they've been telling us about this Z series. The fact that it's going to work perfectly for stills photographers. It still functions a lot like one of their stills lenses, but there's a huge amount of controls for video users which are going to make people like me really happy. So that unfortunately is the end of my time with this amazing 24-105. So I just want to give you my quick concluding thoughts. Now, firstly, I think this is basically 2 lenses in one. We're used to seeing the standard 24-105 f4 lens, and we're used to seeing 24-70 f2.8s. This is obviously an amazing combination of the 2 of them, which I think is really cool. To be honest, if you were only going to have one lens in your kit bag, I would say this is probably the perfect one to have. It's going to suit so many different shooters. I can bring it to Richmond Park, I can get some nice landscapes, I can get some closer up wildlife stuff, although I don't think that's really going to be the primary use for this lens. I think event shooters is really where this is designed. It's so perfect for if you're attending an event, and the fact that you can get in close to people and you can use that 105 to punch in without actually getting really close to people, making them feel uncomfortable, making them understand that you're photographing them or filming them at an event. But of course, having that 24 means that you can still get that nice wide stuff. It also means you can be reactive to what's going on around you. If the event is unfolding, and having that huge amount of focal range just means that it's such a workhorse of a lens, much like the 24-105s that people always used to use that are f4. That is kind of the benefit of that 24-105, is it's just a huge range of focal length, but then being able to have that f2.8, have those extra few stops of light, because event shooters know they're often really poorly lit. Or just having that depth of field, because sometimes f4 isn't going to give you the most appealing depth of field, whereas f2.8 I think is so much nicer and easier on the eye. It's really cool. There's so much to love about this lens. Now, when it comes to price, this lens is on the pricier side. It's $3,599, so it's about £3,600, which is obviously an incredibly expensive lens. There's no 2 ways about it. But because you're getting so much value for your money, because this is a true hybrid lens, it's so well catered to anybody that is a true hybrid shooter, and because I really genuinely think if you only had one lens in your bag, like this would almost cover you on almost every single shoot that you would do, you could do it really well with just this. You do have to consider this is the world's first ever f2.8 24-105, so of course, I don't know how they've built these things with the optics, but it makes sense that it is on the pricier side. Now, in terms of more personal thoughts, I would also say that I love using a gimbal, and I also love using a 24-70. And I would say that I think you could put this on a gimbal, but it would be very much on the heavier side of a payload that you put on a gimbal. And I think it would be awkward to use, not just because of the weight, but actually because it's really long. So you are going to struggle to actually rig that up on a gimbal properly, which could be a little bit annoying. Now, again, they have compensated for that by the fact that actually, because it has this internal zoom, that is really nice. It won't throw off that weight distribution. But I do think personally, that's something that I noticed that I think I would struggle to actually rig this up on a gimbal. I don't think it's very well suited to that, but I do think it's pretty much really well suited to almost every other shooting situation. And actually on this tiny R5 body, it does feel really big, but if I was to use it on one of their more cinema range cameras, such as the C70, I think it would feel a lot more at home having a lens this big. And again, having all those controls, meaning that I don't need to go into all the settings, really, really appeals to me. Now, one last thing to mention is the fact that they're actually, alongside this lens, early next year, launching a power zoom alongside it, which is really exciting for video users. Anybody that doesn't know what a power zoom is, it basically is just going to be a little attachment that you can pop on the side of the lens, and it has buttons which you can then use to zoom in or out, because actually when you're zooming yourself, it's really hard to zoom consistently, and that power zoom allows it to be perfectly consistent. So it's really nice if you want to do that slow zoom in, because my hands certainly aren't stable enough to do so. It also means that you can control that power zoom remotely, which is fantastic if you don't have access to your camera, or if you wanted to put it somewhere a bit more interesting, like if you actually wanted to rig this lens up onto a drone, you can utilize that power zoom to still zoom in or out while your drone's 100 meters up in the air. The power zoom uses a USB-C connector, and actually, unlike Canon's previous power zoom, this one isn't battery powered. It powers itself through the camera, which is really cool. We don't know the price on the power zoom yet, but as it's coming out early next year, it's a little while away, so we'll let you know closer to the time. This is the first lens in a very long time that I'm truly really excited about, just because it's kind of a sign of perhaps what's to come with Canon. The fact that it combines these two amazing things, that 24-105 and that f2.8 aperture, I think that's awesome. I'd be really interested to also hear what you guys think though, so pop a comment down below and let me know. Otherwise, I've been George and I've been working with Wex today. See you later.